Welcome everybody to the online cultural Majlis reboot. عيد مبارك عليكم وكل عام وانتم بخير وعساكم العايدين والسالمين. My name is Sultan Sooud Al Qassemi. I'm coming to you from Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates, where we are hoping that you are all safe wherever you are in these days. I know a lot of people are joining us from the Middle East, and it's a very difficult time for us all. So hoping for these difficult circumstances to end as soon as possible, and for us all to be able to be together in person and better events, hopefully, going forward. Today, we have a very, very special guest for the relaunch of the online cultural Majlis. Some of you have attended during COVID days, some familiar faces. Nice to see you all back. And our special guest is one of the leading scholars of modern art in the Arab world, a leading curator, a person who a lot of people look up to, whether they are students or other scholars or curators. And we're very, very privileged to have her with us. Dr. Nada, thank you many, many times for making time for us today on Eid, no less. And with your permission, I'll start sharing my screen, and we can begin to go on this journey with Dr. Nada Shabout on the reboot of the online cultural Majlis. I want to start by saying, I want to start by saying a big thanks to my colleagues, Malak Abdel Hafid and Abdullah Takriti, who have worked on these slides. Nada sent us photos, and they put them together so beautifully, as you will see. So thanks to them and my other colleagues as well. Dr. Nada, we'll start the journey. Okay.
First, let me say thank you so much, Sultan, for doing this. Yes, it brings back a lot of, COVID memories, and we're hoping that this is be a much shorter period than that. But I have to say this was a very motivating thing for me, because I have been sort of at loss, not knowing what to do. And so this was fun. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. So let me see. Can I spotlight more than one person? Add spotlight. Yes. So, Dr. Nada, I'd like to start with just going over some images of your early life. We have on the screen here pictures of two individuals on the left, a very handsome man, a very beautiful woman, and these two individuals are your parents.
Yes.
And what were their names? What are their names?
My father, Mohsen Shabout, and my mother, Mary Tawfiq Alawi. My father is Iraqi, my mother is Palestinian. They met in London. They were students. And then this beautiful baby was born. That is me. Yeah.
We all agree. And this picture in the middle, where is that picture taken?
So I'm not sure where. I don't really remember where. I mean, we lived in Portsmouth. I was born in Glasgow, but we lived in Portsmouth, and then my father was attending college in London. So was my mother. So it's all over the place. And to be honest, I have to sort of locate these the statue to figure out where exactly I am in this photo. But it's in the UK. I was about 4.5 years old when we moved to Baghdad. So this is all in the UK.
And may I ask you how your parents met?
So they were studying different topics in different colleges, but they met through a mutual friend who introduced, both my parents, and then they found out that they lived in the same building, ironically. And so Mom always tells a story about her landlady calling, asking her to help with this Iraqi student who had a tooth extracted and is throwing blood all over the place. My dad was never a good patient. So that's how they met.
That's a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing it. And we have a lovely photo of you here with one of your first art discoveries. And on the right is a picture, a very special photo, because this was taken in Palestine.
So my mother, Palestinian, Christian Catholic, my father Muslim, they wanted to get married. It was not, this is in late 50s, so it wasn't really a very acceptable concept. My father did go to Jerusalem to ask for my mom's hand in marriage, but that didn't really go very well either. And so at this age, I was 4 years old, 4.5 years old. My mom took me to Jerusalem, and that I was the peacemaker to get them back together. So this is my first visit to Palestine. I'm wearing a Palestinian outfit, and this is with my grandmother, my mother's mother, Hanna Sabriya Alawi, and we're in some garden in Ramallah in this photo.
And do you have memories of Palestine? I know you were young, but do you have any memory of Palestine in those days?
Yeah, I mean, it's very vague, and I suspect that actually my memories are from the photos that I see, because I mean, I don't think I'm not that kind who had excellent memory at the age of 4. So no, I don't think I remember much of that. But I do remember the house. I remember meeting my grandfather for the first time. So things like that, because my grandfather didn't know who I am, but he just saw a little child and he was playing with me. And then they told him that I'm Mary's daughter, and this is how, peace was made. So at that moment, I actually have recollection of, yeah.
Building bridges since your childhood.
I know, right? Yeah.
So, Doctora, here we flash forward a while, and we see this photo of you in Baghdad in
Yes.
1980. Tell us about that time, and what were you doing in studying in Baghdad, agriculture of all things?
So, I mean, moving forward, like you say, at the age of 5, we moved to Baghdad, where I learned Arabic and went to school. And I'm really sad that I'm not able to show you high school pictures, because I am in Abu Dhabi, and all of my pictures are actually back in Texas. So this is so I graduated. I took baccalaureate exam in 1979. And I had an 86 grade. And so I'm never good about these exams. That's why I don't give them to my students either. And so I put on the form of what I want to study. هندسة معماري هندسة معماري هندسة معماري, بس هندسة معماري was the highest of scores needed. So the system decided, the algorithm, I'm not sure, decided that I should go to School of Agriculture, completely unrelated to anything. I'm not even, I don't have a green thumb. I'm not into planting. And so I was there for a few months until my father did the process to get me so I can go to the enemy of Iraq at the time and study in the United States. And our passport said جميع الدول ما عدا الولايات المتحدة وإسرائيل, where you can go. So you had to get special permission من المخابرات so you can actually leave to go study in the US.
So the passport read all countries except the USA and Israel, and yes, you had to get permission from the intelligence services to travel.
Very complicated. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, we have I think a picture later on in the US. So this is a really nice photo here of you with some friends studying architecture at the AA.
So, I mean, in 84, I graduated with a degree in architecture from the USA. I was studying, but then I went to London, and I went at the School of Architecture Association, School of Architecture at the AA in London, and was, continuing my studies in architecture. And you see some of my friends here. Actually, number 3 is a Malaysian friend who studies in Texas, and she came to visit me in the US. And then number 1 is Maysoon Demluji, high school friend of mine, as well as college friend of mine. Rawia, number 2, is an architect practicing in London. And number 5 is a dear friend from high school as well, who lives in Dubai now, Alia Jafar. So it was, an interesting period of, after studying architecture in the US, to go study architecture in the UK and see how much tension there is between these two countries in terms of the education of architecture.
Can I ask you about the posters in the back?
There was the one behind Aliyah number 5 is there was an Islamic art exhibition at the British Museum that I attended. So, there is that is that poster from there. And then whatever, so it was like what, 5 years. I left Baghdad 1980, June 1980, right before a few months before the Iran-Iraq war started. And so I had this sort of memory and nostalgia. So I have a lot of little, sort of folkloric images from Iraq, Iraqi images, this guy with, I guess, gahwa or something, stuff like that.
Okay, great. So your trajectory basically was college in first in Baghdad, and then you moved to the US, and then you moved to the UK.
Yeah.
Here is another photo from the same year, from 1980, but this is a very also intimate family photo.
Yeah,
with your brother.
Yeah, that's the last New Year's Eve for me in Baghdad in 1980s with my parents and my 2 brothers, the youngest in the middle, Nabil, who's a surgeon now, and then the other one, Nadim, who is a computer engineer, and they both actually live in Texas.
Okay. And here is when you first visited the US, I think bottom right, with your father in New York.
Yeah, I actually went to New York 1980 on my own, and I was studying there first. My parents left at 1982, so this is when they came to the US and to New York with my dad and my brother Nabil. Yeah, on the one on the right. So I was already 2 years into studying architecture. My parents did not like New York, and so that's when they actually moved to Texas. This is the beginning of our sort of, connection to Texas that kind of became like a second home. The one on the left is in Texas, much later, after I had 3 degrees, I think. So in the 1991, yes.
And this is in the airport.
This is at the airport, seeing off some friends who graduated and were returning to their countries. Luckily, specifically, this was Ghada Bouri, who was a Palestinian who lives in between Greece and Paris. And so we're seeing her off at that time. Okay. I think actually it was also the same period that Khalil Rabah left. So, Khalil Rabah and I went to school together. We studied architecture together.
This is a very interesting photo for me, or a pair of photos, which I remember having a red circle around you, but maybe you can tell us which ones you are here. And what were you doing exactly?
So in college, students. So this feeling of not belonging or being different, and always participating International Day, and wearing your clothing. But this was actually also a Debka, a Palestinian Debka group that we had formed, with students. And on the picture on the right, the third. From the right, yes, that where you have your cursor, and then the one on the left, I am on the on the left. And so we were so proud to get Palestinian dresses, and we practiced so hard. We even one time with the Palestinian flag went to Palestine, Texas. There was a demonstration there, and so we were actually much in demand. Whenever there was any Arab activity, because we had something called the Arab Youth Club, and everyone in the Debka group is part of the Arab Youth Club, and so we would be invited to entertain in any of these events. This was
where
when,
did you get the?
Sorry, this was when there was I fluctuated between focusing activism on Iraq and activism on Palestine. Because, then we used to say when we were young that, okay, our mother doesn't have a country, but our father does. And then it became, well, we both don't have a country. And so we have to promote both cultures.
Can I ask you, where did you get the Palestinian dresses from? Did you bring them with you from Palestine, or especially in the 1980s in the US?
Yeah, no, actually, that one was my aunt who still lives in Jerusalem, got me that one. And so it's actually vintage, a real Palestinian dress worn by a Palestinian fallaha that I still have. And it's, and everybody else also have some connection somewhere. So we brought these from Palestine itself.
Excellent. Okay.
We also had, it's so funny because we also, one time we did operate Al Abaya, that's an Iraqi one. And so we bought the Shadishu Abayat. I don't have a photo of that, but yeah.
Yes. I mean, I know that we asked a lot from you to find photos that I think most of your photos were kept in the US.
Exactly.
So I'm glad that we got these.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving, now we see, I mean, we see the time that you spent in research, in meeting with artists, and one of your most important interlocutor artists was Shakir Hassan al-Said.
So this is when so after studying architecture and returning from the UK to the US because the Iraq-Iran war got really heated in the UK, and to be honest, my father was very concerned of me being in London as an Iraqi. So went back to the US, and I sort of had a period of trying to decide what I wanted to do. Do I want to continue in architecture? I did not like the 8 to 5 sort of, job thing. And so I did a second undergrad degree in fine arts, but then I decided that I am not an artist, but rather, because when I was making art, I was channeling Dia Azawi and everyone else whose work I had seen and interested in. And so I started then in graduate school, shifting to art history and criticism and actually researching those artists. And so this is when I was actually doing research for my PhD dissertation. And I was so lucky to see Shakir Hassan al-Said in 1997, spend a whole day with him. He took me to the storage in National Gallery. We sat at Darat al-Fanoon. This is at the hotel. The name of the hotel was Kahraman. Some very simple hotel in Al Abdali before the Abdali became the big sort of mall area there. And what is interesting, we sat in the garden for so long, and people just passed by and said hello to him. He was amazing to just sort of talk to him. And he was so generous and explained things and sketched things. And I think I understand Shakir Hassan because of that time that I spent with him. Because when I was working on him for my dissertation, I really had to read everything he wrote in Arabic, translate to English, and then retranslate to Arabic so I can understand what is it that he's talking about. But when he explained it, it was just amazing. Made my life so much easier to understand it.
So you're conducting research in the 90s. There's no email, there's no internet. How did you get in touch with Shakir Hassan?
I didn't. I got it by chance. I saw him. He was in Amman and I was in Amman. We were at Darat al-Fanoon for a talk, and he stood up and asked the question, and I looked back and I'm like, oh my God, this is Shakir. And it was a Thursday. So after the talk, I went to him and I'm like, start Shakir. And he's like, he did not shake hands. And he said, let's meet on Saturday. I spent Friday at the mosque. And so let's meet on Saturday morning. I mean, I don't know how I waited till Saturday morning. I was so struck that, it was just amazing to meet him. And he was the most sort of humble person, once you get to know him and you're in his presence. He said, can I give you a gift? And he gave me a gift, a Quran that I still have. And that I have with me even here in Abu Dhabi. I take it with me wherever I go.
Fantastic. What a story. Thank you for sharing it. So here we meet you a couple of years later. You've conducted all this research, you've traveled in the region, and now you're graduating in this photo, and your dissertation is based on this research that you've conducted. Tell us a bit about your PhD.
So, it was really interesting when I was doing this research. I was in Amman. I actually went to Jerusalem as well, and went to Al Wasati Center and met with Sulaiman Mansour and Nabil Anani and others when I was in Palestine. But I have to tell you, actually, first time I met Sulaiman Mansour was in Dallas, Texas in the 80s. They had an exhibition. The Arab League brought them for an exhibition. And Khalil Rabah and I went and chauffeured Sulaiman Mansour around. I mean, this is such an amazing memory. But so, I was in Amman. I couldn't go to Baghdad to do research, but I was in Amman and I was in London. I had communicated with Yaa Azawi, who's sitting here, before, early 90s. I was finished writing my master's, and I wanted to publish an article based on my master's. So I sent him a fax asking for copyright permission. He immediately called me. He's like, who is this crazy woman asking for copyright permission when no one cares about copyright, about Arab art? And this is actually how my relationship with Diya started. Before I went in 79, after Amman, I was in London and I met him in person. We had just, sort of been communicating. And he said to me, ليش ما قلتي انت معماريه وتعرفي, because Maysoon was my roommate and we were friends, and then he knows her parents, and so they told him I was in town. But it was, I was like, I wanted to meet you on my own merit without, wasta. And so it was really a very important moment, because he had been so supportive throughout my career. From that day forward, he was most generous with material and support. So it was, in a way, maybe easier to do research in the 90s, because you contact artists and artists are like, what? Sure, here, you can have everything I have. You don't have to get permissions from anyone, and no galleries and nothing. But of course, again, the resources were so much less than here. And so it was really interesting to get to this point and graduate. And also because I really had no one who was guiding me through Arab art. My committee, after being rejected by many universities, because what is modern Arab art? You can do Islamic or you can do Middle Eastern studies. I had a committee, a PhD committee with my chair was a 19th century French art historian, but she knows, imperialism and Orientalism, and then an Egyptologist and a post-colonial India studies person and a philosophy professor. And so they were like, we're guiding you through methodology, but we have no idea what you're talking about. And I was really interested in the use of the Arabic letter in art, and it was around the time that also Shabout published the first Arabic book of Hurufiyya, and also, that it was after or during that period, Wajdan Hashimi published her book as well. And so it sort of very much intrigued me. But through it all, and really, if you see some of the artwork that I made when I was doing an art degree, you can see how I had all these images of the of Faiq Hassan, of that, kind of led me into the research that I was doing, the intrigue of the research that I was doing.
You're very fortunate to have had the support of these giants and people who
Absolutely.
opened up the doors for you, such as Ustad Diya Azawi, who's with us today. Speaking of Ustad Diya Azawi, here's a photo of you with him and with Al-Marhum Ustad
Rafa
Rafi
al-Nasri.
al-Nasri, another Iraqi giant of modernity, printmaking especially, but also all sorts of modern art. And it
if
was
I
in
am,
these days, yes,
yes,
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. No, I was just going to
No, go
say,
ahead,
and
go
if
ahead.
I'm not mistaken, this is in the cafe of the National Gallery in Amman, where we were sitting.
Right. Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, after 2003, I went to Baghdad in June 2003, so I couldn't go to Baghdad before June 2003 because of, the way my parents left. And in fact, in the 90s, when I was doing research, I got married. And so I got a new passport and I took my husband's name, Khalil, so thinking I can go to Baghdad with not Shabout name. But after a lot of investigation, I was told, okay, if you come for 3 days, because then people will start saying, Mahsen Shabout's daughter is in town and you get your father in trouble. So I did not go. But then 2003 happened. And while I protested against the invasion and interference, okay, so after it happened, the only one thing that I can do is go to Iraq. And it's so funny because the US government reissued a passport for me in one day with the Shabout name because I wanted to go to Iraq, which is, amazing. I don't know how that happened. I think maybe they thought I was going with on a different mission. But anyway, so I went and I saw what I saw, and my mission about sort of, documenting. And at the time, I thought, maybe I can find some of the lost work started. But I also understood after 2003 that I couldn't keep on going to Iraq. Things kept getting worse. So Amman was really the point of meeting. Most of the Iraqi artists were already had moved to Amman, some in the 90s, some following. And so it was a great place to go and do the research and meet with everyone. And, it was a joy to go and, be in, hang out with both Diya and Allah Yarhamah Rafa and Nasri and May Mudaffar and others when I'm in Amman.
And Dr. Nada,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, no, good.
This document on the right is one of the results of your continuous visits and research, uncovering what you call the lost works, which are hundreds or maybe thousands of paintings that went missing, thousands of paintings that went missing as a result of the events of 2003 and the looting, the destruction and the looting. And this is one of the artworks also that was that disappeared from the museum that you put on the cover of this paper.
So, I actually wrote a grant for the National Endowments of Humanities because they were giving money in relation to Iraq work. I submitted twice that research, and anyone on the call who has ever submitted a grant to the National Endowment of the Humanities know it's like this big papers that you have to do, and I was rejected both times. So McGuire Gibson, who was the founding president of at the time named the American Academic Research Institute in Iraq, said, "Can I see your proposal?" He looked at my proposal and he's like, "Yeah, there's no way they're going to give you money to do what you want to do." So Tari supported me through two grants, but also there's a Tari house in Amman at the time, and so we were able to meet and find people and scan. Rafa's nephew, Muhannad al-Nasri, architect Muhannad al-Nasri, who lives in Dubai now, was in Baghdad in 2003, and he was the guy who took me around, and we were able to even locate the photographer of Markaz Saddam Lil Funun, and I purchased many images from her. And so it was a tedious work of cross-referencing, what has been published. That is also the time when I started collecting anything. I mean, I had been collecting for archival material for my research, but this became more important. So I photographed and scanned the catalogs in the National Library, at Darat al-Fanoon, anything that I can find, so we can cross-reference and find. There were over 8,000 works at the Museum of Modern Art, Markaz Saddam al-Fanoon سابقا, that disappeared. Only a few hundreds of them were found in a basement of the ancient museum, the historical museum, and they were flooded in water. So they were even in very bad condition. Until today, most of these works are lost, they're gone. And so I found out after a while, after I actually, I go to Amman or I go to Beirut, I walk in a gallery, and apparently gallerists were saying, oh, here she comes, that crazy woman, hide the works. So I was no longer able to see any of the stolen works, although I saw stolen works in Amman, in Beirut, in New York, everywhere, in London. And so I was sort of, I decided, okay, fine, I can only document. I'm not going to be able to find them. I am not Indiana Jones, although being called that. But, so I started documenting. And so these works, your show, an archival website later, kind of started with this from this research at the time.
We'll be seeing the website in a second. So thank you, Dr. Nada. This was one of your sort of landmark early exhibitions, Dafatar, yes, which means books. In Arabic, books. Artist books. Could you tell us a bit about Dafatar, please?
So, my relationship, through my connection relationship with Dia, I was able to witness many experiments of things that had happened. So in 2003, when I was in Baghdad, I delivered 2 Dafatar from Karim Rissan, by Karim Rissan, to London, to Dia, because Dia was sort of engaging the artist inside of Baghdad by prompting them, sending them prompts to do some work and promising to, just buy it. I know he's here and he's probably going to not like all that I'm going to be saying, but he helped support many artists artistically, as well as just sort of in mundane ways of keeping their family going. And so he accumulated a large collection of these Dafatar, and we thought it would be a great idea to start introducing them. This is an important trend that had started through late 90s, early 2000, kind of continued in Iraqi art that was specific and in its intention. And so Dafatar, this exhibition that actually started in 2005 in my University of North Texas, and actually traveled to 5 or 6 different places, including New York and any other places. And I was able to bring some of the artists, including Hana Malallah, Nazar Yahya, Mohammed Shimmari, and others. Karim Rissan never got the visa, for example, to come. And so it was a way of showing a very pivotal, very activist work of art, very documentary, multi-layered, but that is within an American context. This is, for me, these 2 things were always in play. And I want to infiltrate the canon of art history within the Western world, while I equally want to write the history of Iraqi or Arab art that has not been written. So it was very important for me to be able to do this exhibition. And by the way, this is one of the main reasons why I stayed at the University of Texas for the longest of time. I always found support, which I would have not found elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a very important point. Thank you, Nadia, and congratulations. It's the 20th anniversary of this landmark exhibition.
Oh my God, yes, yeah, it is.
So here we are with another major exhibition that includes really some masterpieces of modern Arab art, modern Iraqi art. And this was an exhibition that was co-curated with Professor Zainab Bahrani, and it took place at the Wallach Art Gallery at Columbia University. And some paintings are recognizable instantly to us here.
Yes.
So tell us about this exhibition and how did you get these works? And I mean, what a story that you showed this in New York almost 19 years ago.
So this was the beginning of my relationship with Madhaf, Arab Museum of Modern Art, or it wasn't called that then, it was with Sheikh Hassan, with Qatar Foundation, and with Sheikh Mayasa, who actually was a graduate student at Columbia University at the time when we did this exhibition. And so I was, right before that, I was in Amman, Jordan, on a Fulbright teaching at Jordan University. And, Zainab Bahrani said to me, there is an opening at the gallery and we can do an exhibition. You want to do an exhibition? I said, yes, let's do an exhibition. And I mean, it was sort of like, all the stars were aligned and we were able to get these amazing works from Madhaf to Columbia University and have this exhibition. I think this exhibition not only sort of, there was a very important publication with it and that it kind of, started a different conversation, but I think it also kind of surprised and baffled, so I've been poking through exhibitions, smaller ones, bigger ones, Dafatar, this one about Iraqi art, trying to get, major critics to come and be interested in this. And many people came. But I think, this speaks to a lot about, the image in the Americans, mind at the time, that they will see this art, ask questions about it, but it does not sort of fit the image that they have in their head about what Iraqi art should be. And so then they don't engage it critically, which is, such a shame that, it took until now for many to engage with it critically, in the last exhibition. But this was an exhibition that was able to sort of break that boxed image of what Iraqi art should be or is. Because even in 2003, when I went with a team of scholars to Baghdad, and I took them to several galleries. Qasim Septi Hiwar Gallery was there, and all of them kept saying to me, but this is not the art that, we're imagined to see. They wanted to see sort of, the touristy art, the thing that they can buy with boats and nakhla water or something like that. So that is the image that's stuck in everybody's head, unfortunately.
I mean, it really looks like it was a beautiful exhibition. And again, congratulations on bringing all these works together. I want to move maybe to the following year where you went to MIT and you were a visiting professor at MIT, I believe, and you had an exceptional group of students, some of whom you still work with today. I'd like you to tell us about this group of students that you had, and also about Rhonda Saad, whose name rings in our ears, even though we've never met her. But she's passed away at a very young age, and there was a prize named after her. So I'd love to hear a bit about your class at MIT and why was there a prize named after Rhonda Saad?
Yes, of course. So Nasser Abbat, my mentor, who was going on sabbatical, asked me to go fill in for him and teach his classes. And this was a graduate class that I was teaching at the time. And it has Annika Lenson. I believe she had said that was the first class that she was taking in the PhD program. And Randa Saad as well, that you see on the edge. Randa was auditing this class because she was at Rutgers, as a matter of fact, student there. And she also became AMCA's first treasurer. And she had started...
Sorry, what is AMCA?
The Association Modern Contemporary Art from the Arab World, Iran, and Turkey. I think we have a slide about it later. And so she was very active and very engaged, and she had started doing research on Palestinian art. So, in fact, even years later, after she passed away, and it was such a fluke accident that, it was so sad. In 2010, she was supposed to actually be in the conference, the first conference that AMCA held at the opening at Madhaf. But, she had an accident, passed away. But her research continued to support even our own, and many years later, when we were doing the book with the international program at MoMA, it was her documentation of Zulfa Saadi's, things that we've heard of, like the guest book that we found in the boxes that her mother allowed us to access even after she passed through. So we named this award after her, and where students submit their graduate paper and acknowledge the work that they're doing, as well as acknowledge the work of that Renda had done.
Thank you, Ned. That's a really beautiful move. And
such a such a loss, sad loss, Yeah.
So here we come to the publication of modern Arab art, the formation of Arab aesthetics, which is based on your PhD. So can you tell us a bit about what did you take from the PhD and what didn't make what didn't make it to this book? And also, it's been 17, 18 years since this book has been published. I know you've been asked this question many times, but what would you change if you could? What would you add? What did you take away from this book if you could go back and revisit 15, 16 years later?
So, when I decided that everybody who you finish your PhD, you get an academic job, you're supposed to convert your dissertation into a book, into your first book, and publish it. It took me a while to get to it, but it's because to get it published, because I submitted it to many different presses, but they did not accept who wants to publish on modern Arab art. It wasn't a thing. I actually played a strategic move, and Wajdan Ali had published her modern Islamic art with the University of Florida Press. So I went to them and said, listen, you published this book, I have a book that sort of engages with that book. So it's, it's to your benefit to publish that again. They bought the idea. And in fact, once they did that, it was really fast to get it out in press and with as many colored images as I got. And I have to say that, I was extremely grateful to Princess Wajdan, because I got a lot of the images through the National Gallery. And so it was, kind of easier to do. Now, the dissertation itself, with the title of a dissertation, that's never acceptable. And for me, it was also my way of understanding the history. So there are lots of sort of long chapters on the socio-political history of the Arab world that didn't make it in the book. There were many other sort of, elongated entries about other work of art that didn't make it to the book. Publishing a book, like anyone who publishes understands, that will need to be packaged in a certain way by the press, so it is sellable. And I'm happy to say that it's completely out of print now, and so I fully have the rights for it again in English and in Arabic. It was translated twice to Arabic, but out of my own sort of ignorance of Arabic grammar, and never got published in Arabic. This was based on my research in the 1990s, right? So with, a few updates in 2007. I mean, till 2007. Can you imagine now, almost 20 years now after, the amount of archival access we have that I did not have then? These two women who you see as photos, Salwa Maqdadi and Wajdan Ali, were basically my most major resource outside of the artists themselves and their libraries. Salwa Maqdadi, who in the 1980s had started the International Council for Women in the Arts, was my go-to for images, artist contacts. She was going around interviewing people, so she was accumulating the archive. And then, Wajdan, because of the book that she published, but also because of the National Gallery. So and then, in the 1990s, Darat al-Fanoon opened, and so I was able to also access what Darat al-Fanoon had. But so my sort of revising the narrative was very restrictive in this book because it was based on the narratives that both of Salwa and Princess Wujdan did. And theirs was based on even less sort of, resources than mine. But also I scholarly disagree in some of the aspects that philosophically disagree some of the aspects of what Princess Wujdan's argument advances. But so what I would do with this book, I mean, to be honest, that and I'm glad it's out of print, and I'm glad not many can buy it anymore, because I have since changed a lot of this sort of the construction of the narrative, let's say, not the details about the artist. So, the chapter on Diya or on Hurufiyya or on Shakir, those are still very valid, but it's the overall framing. I mean, to start with, it was kind of naive but opportunist that I would, because again, of lack of anything else, to do something called modern Arab art. There were a lot of books after that, that are coffee tables of modern Arab art. But really today, if one of my students come to me and says they want to do something about modern Arab art, I will not allow them to do that because it's too wide, too large. You can't do that. What we need, but at that time we needed to have a big picture so we can in fact then focus on the sort of small pictures, small sort of details of things, which now are, is what others are doing, including me. So yeah, a lot will be done.
I want to point out that the cover image is a work by Ustad Ziya Azzawi. Is that correct?
The cover image as well as the first image inside. I mean, I suppose, it's not a secret of, that I'm a great fan of Ziya's work.
Okay. Thank you. Moving forward, this is an incredible photo with some of the giants of art of the Arab world. This is a photo that was taken at the opening of Madhaf Museum around 2010, and I think there was a conference that took part on the sidelines. And maybe tell us a little bit about meeting Ibrahim al-Salahi, meeting Farid Bilkahiya, and many other artists who were present.
I mean, this was a very important moment for Arab art, the opening of Madhaf Arab Museum of Modern Art, and for me to actually curate Sajil, the exhibition Sajil, a century of modern art, from the permanent collection of Madhaf, was also an incredible sort of development for Arab art, because I was able to advance my own research. I mean, exhibitions are always excuses for further research for art historians. And so I was able to kind of look through so much wealth of works of art, and the Iraqi collection at Madhaf remains the most amazing in what it has. But I also got the opportunity, because I curated intervention in the second exhibition that was with where I commissioned and worked directly with Hassan Sharif, Farid Belkahiya, Ibrahim Salahi, Ahmed Nawar, and Ziya Azzawi, because there was this other exhibition, Told Untold Retold, by Sam Bardwell and Till Feldrath, that is with the younger artists that you see in the photo. And so working with them was, an amazing opportunity to working with Ibrahim Salahi, meeting him in Oxford. He actually cooked for me, and he made the most amazing salad, Sudanese salad. So, and just to get to know, I mean, I may be, you've met many of the artists as well, but I may be one of the last who have known a lot of many of those artists and worked with them directly. I mean, the modernists, extremely fortunate. And of course, Sheikh Hassan, who's in the middle of this photo, is an extremely important figure in making this happen, in allowing, putting all the forces, all the resources together, and allowing us to get to this point and do this work. So this was just an amazing gathering. And yeah, we had AMCA's first conference at Madhaf, which was a 3-day conference, and sort of gathered almost everyone who's working on Arab art.
I think a lot of us wish we were there at this moment. And here is another couple of photos.
Yes.
We don't have to talk about them at length, but you're wearing a beautiful outfit.
Bahraini. Yeah, it's a Bahraini thobe. What we call thobe nashel, or hashmi, and we call it bil Iraqi. Yeah.
I remember, Dr. Nada, I was there and it was freezing. That is my number one memory of the opening of Madhaf.
Yeah, the only day that it was cold, but last December, the celebration of 15 years of the opening of Madhaf was also cold. So it's a thing about openings at Madhaf. Yeah.
The person who's standing next to me is my dear husband, Ahmed Khalil, who is someone I met while I was studying architecture. And he, in fact, has been the main supporter of all of my work. And I must say, he was the one who paid for the registering of AMCA in Texas as a nonprofit organization.
Okay, so we move forward to coming slides. So this is, again, one of the most important initiatives that have come out in the last couple of decades, especially with regards to Iraq. Can you tell us a little bit about the role of the modern art in Iraq archive that I think you call Maya? Is that what you refer to it?
Yeah, Modern Art Iraq Archive. I mean, after I collected all the material or the images of the works, stolen works from the museum in Iraq, I mean, I couldn't do much with them. This was an alternative. And scholar Salim Bahlouli, when he was a student, he came to me and he said, well, what if we also add text to it? And then I thought it was a great idea. And we started scanning text. It became an important resource for anyone who's doing research. And so, and it remains an important research. So this is sort of a precursor to El Mawrid.
Thank you. And I wanted to show the viewers an image of what it looks like when you go into the website. It gives you an image of the work, the last known location, and any other information that is available. And I think this is an important resource for people who are looking to engage and study modern Iraqi art, especially some of the stolen or lost works. Not everything is stolen, some is just lost. And it's very important to know information about them in Arabic and English. So thank you so much. You mentioned that Texas was maybe a bit remote, but at the same time you were able to bring friends, and I think this is a nice photo showing.
And invite artists, do exhibitions, do symposia, and so this is in my office at the University of North Texas.
Yeah. So moving forward. This is an event in which Barjeel and NYU Abu Dhabi and AMCA collaborated in 2016, and here we have an image of one of the visits to the Maraya Art Center, and I believe
a graduate symposium that we did, workshop. What is most important about this is many of those graduate students there had never been able to handle a work of Arab art. And you were so generous in allowing us and allowing those students, to actually see the work. Many who you see in this photo, I mean, here's Holiday Powers, here's Tiffany Floyd, they're teaching now. And many, Alessandra Amin, and many others who are now teaching at universities, and this was their first sort of engagement with actual works of art. So important for art historians.
Can I ask you why do you say it's important to engage? And you said, did you say handle? Is that the word you used?
And they handled. And they looked at the back of it as well. They saw it closely. They understood what the artist was doing, which is a complete different thing you lose if you're just looking at images in a book. That does not really tell you texture, feel of holding the work of art.
I see. Okay. So moving forward, and I wanted to just ask you a bit about the importance of private collections. We mentioned Barjeel in the previous slide. And here is Dr. Hassanin Ibrahimi's collection in Amman. We also have the Dallul collection in Beirut. So we talked about the public collections such as Madhaf in Doha, but then we see that there's a number of private collections between Beirut and Sharjah and Amman and elsewhere. So what is the importance of the role of private collection?
And those were not available, let's say, in the 90s and early 2000s when I was doing much of my research or as a student. So their importance is that again, students can go do research there. So, I can send students to go look at works of art. B, this is an opportunity for us to write history of that. And C, I can borrow them to put them in exhibitions. So these private collections are extremely important part of the writing the history of the historiography and writing the history of modern Arab art.
Okay. And this is a photo, a couple of photos that you took in Palestine. Was this one of your first visits to Palestine in a number of years?
Yeah, it was since like 2007, 2008, I was there. And then this was actually Tina Sherwell, who was the director of the International Art Academy in Ramallah, invited me to spend a week, give workshops, and in Arabic. So it was extremely important that I had to, because she was inviting amazing people. And one of the students said to me, all these important people, they come, they speak at us in English, and I don't understand the thing they say. So I really worked hard to speak in Arabic with them. And, again, it's to me, it's so important to be engaging with students, everywhere. They had less even resources than other places. But of course, it also gave me the opportunity to hang out with, Vera and Sliman and Nabil and visit with the artists. Always a plus.
Thank you. So moving forward, the founding of AMCA in 2007, you did say a couple of words about AMCA.
Yeah.
But maybe you can elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, and you should, everybody can go to the website and see. And again, AMCA was born in 2007 because I suffered through my graduate work and I wanted to increase the number. And it's, everything comes together for one strategic reason. So we can have more students and more studies and more research about Arab art. And so we needed to supply the support for that. And so, we have conferences, we have awards, we have research and news. And so, we try to facilitate, we try to provide resources for students and scholars.
And this is a photo with Ustad Ziya at his exhibition. You did say a few words about Ustad Ziya. Maybe if you'd like to elaborate on the importance of having someone of his stature available to a researcher such as yourself.
And he is amazing, not just me. Anyone who goes to he actually meets with him and he provides him with resources and research. I mean, now we have Luisa and Mesa in his studio as well. But he has one of the most important libraries on Iraqi art and Arab art in general, as well as his own knowledge, of course. So.
I'd like to ask you a bit about this book, Modern Art in the Arab World, Primary Documents. So this is a book that was published by the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and it includes dozens of primary documents that have never been made available in English before, going back as early as the 1880s, all the way to the late 20th century. Can I ask you a bit about this book? What was the impetus? How did you decide to work on it? And how did you select the texts for this book? Maybe an example of one of the texts that you selected.
So in that class that I taught at MIT that Annika Linson took, she came up to me and she said, we should have a source book for students so we can have this, access this research. This was, while she was taking Arabic classes and so on. So that idea stayed with us. And eventually we got to it. And, it was a photo with me and with Sarah Rogers and Annika at MoMA working on this book. So then the international publication program at MoMA approached us and said, would you do a book on Arab art? And this is a book that took 7 years because we translated more than 125 texts mostly from Arabic, but some from French and some from Italian. We spent, a couple of years, or 3-4 years actually. So you see the photo with Adenise, for example. We had workshops with the older generation to sort of just mine their memory about things because we were trying to choose the text, and we delivered in this text that's very sort of curated a specific, of course, narrative, but we wanted to, we tried to remain neutral, but we wanted to also open doors for more people to be researching. This is a great book for undergraduate students because they are short text. And so, they enter into the subject. And then we engaged with many of the scholars. Almost every member of AMCA who specialized in something has either a consultant or wrote on wrote a short text and focus text. So this was extremely important because we also kind of reflected a lot about interpretation. Translating something is not easy, as anyone who has worked with translation. And we opted for interpretation as opposed to translation. So it becomes extremely important, but it shows you, now, for example, even the exhibition will talk about all manner of experiments. We have the manifesto of the Baghdad Modern Art Group. And then we translated it once and for all in a way that is acceptable. We also standardize, we work with the Encyclopedia of on modernism in the Arab world at Madhaf to standardize. So we all use this, we all speak the same language, in other words, in terms of English translations of things. So yes, extremely important for those reasons. I just gave a CMAP symposium for MoMA curators, and see, they use this book. They actually kind of, learn about different movements just from this book.
So a couple of things. First of all, the book is available online on the MoMA website. You can go and download it for free. And the second point is we just passed the 1 hour mark, but I'd like to just take another 15 minutes of your time so that I can open up to questions. We have 2 or 3 slides to go, and then I'll open up for questions if that's
sure. Sure.
Possible.
So
I won't go into...
No, but I'm just going to say we launched this book in Beirut as well. This is a photo of the book launch in Beirut, and you see the late Jay Levinson and Saleh Barakat and Glenn Lowry and Annika, of course, and the cover of the book. This is an important archival, so you can see a pattern of things that are happening. And we chose Mahmoud Hammad's composition because A, we love Mahmoud Hammad. B, it's sort of speaks to abstraction, it speaks to Harufiyya, and it does not necessarily kind of highlight one specific thing. So that was the reason for the choice, and it's just a beautiful work of art.
This okay. Moving forward here, amongst the numerous awards that you've been getting, we had to narrow them down because there were so many awards that Nada was receiving. So I highlighted 2. One is an award from her university in Texas with the President Excellence Award, and the other one is what they call the Arab Nobel, the KFAS Award, the Kuwait Foundation for Advanced Sciences Award in 2022. So congratulations. And
first time given, it's first time given to art history. It is the first time that it's given to art history. So that was extremely important. They used to call it the Kuwait Prize. Probably now Nawabigh al-Arab is the new award that is, of more prestige than Jaizat Al-Kuwait. Different awards, yeah.
Congratulations, Nada. Well deserved. Another book that you worked on, this is from the collection of Dr. Farhad Farjam, and it came in 2 different volumes. One was Islamic, but you worked on the modern and contemporary art from the Middle East, also with friends of yours, Sarah Rogers, Venetia Porter, Linda Komarov. And so how is it working on this book? I mean, this is the first book you make of a private collection.
So, I think because of the importance of private collections, as we were saying, it's also important to publish these books and publish them not as just coffee table, but actually scholarly, because we use them. We use them in teaching, and also it's good to educate everyone across the field in scholarly work, and instead of, sort of very generic things that these are books then that disappear. I mean, many of us, it's a small field. We're still a small field. So we are all friends. And so, but we also, try to get important voices in here. I mean, Sultan, you wrote an essay for us as well in this book, because it's a way of bringing all the different voices in one place and able to support this work. I mean, archival material, the publication of these books, they support the field, they support the art production, they support the artists, they support the collectors, and so it's it's an ecosystem that works together.
I'll move on. Visits to Baghdad, again, a city that you've recently visited. I think it was a year or 2 ago as well.
Last November.
This initiative, the initiative of Tarkib is a fascinating initiative in Baghdad.
Yes.
And it's also started by a group of young people, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. As a matter of fact, if it wasn't for the current situation, I would have not been able to be doing this talk, and I would be in Basra, because we had a 10-day Iraq-long trip that we have to reschedule. And this is, so I try to go to Iraq at least once a year. I was there last November, as a matter of fact, and try to engage and activate what is happening inside of Iraq as well. And it's partly research, so I can see what's happening, but it's also partly so I can give back. And Tarkib is an amazing platform for younger artists who are trying to do something different, but also, Maktabat Akram, for example, Mutanabbi Street, important place where you can go find, art resources. But you also see the president of Tari and the executive director of Tari as well, Amanda and Peter, because we also opened a center in Baghdad, and we're hoping to support more research that goes inside of the city with exchanges with scholars. Now, of course, the new development notwithstanding.
Yes. Okay, I'll move on. Maybe just very briefly, this is an exhibition that you co-curated or curated in Texas, focusing on the 1980s. But it was also the site or the occasion where you launched an award to honor Salwa Maghdadi as well.
So my president at the time gave me money and said, do a conference on Arab art. And, the gallery came to me and said, you want to do an exhibition? And so it's like, okay. And, thanks to you, Sultan, this exhibition was possible. A small exhibition, but really important, on the 1980s. The conference was on the 1980s. We're working on the chronicles of the 1980s to publish a book that I am co-editing with, again, Sarah Rogers and Annika Lenson. We just work well together and we understand each other. A book that is in the making will come out soon with short essays, again, scheduled, designed to support research. But we also, that was the occasion we awarded Salwa Maghdadi for her amazing research and support through, and she's an AMCA foundational member as well. And so we have the Salwa Maghdadi Archival Research Travel Awards. As, archives are so important for Salwa that anyone can apply for and use it to go research primary resources. And this was in Denton, Texas.
It's a beautiful step, because Salwa spent so many years traveling around the world interviewing artists. So this is a nice way to honor her. I'd like to end with this current exhibition, which is an exhibition that you worked on, that first opened in upstate New York at Bard College, and then moved to NYU Abu Dhabi, which is where you're based now. Tell us about this exhibition, especially because there seems to be the culmination of so much of your research, your PhD, the exhibition at the Wallach, and so much research, AMCA. Tell us about this show and its, its importance and significance.
When Bard College approached me to see if I would do this exhibition, of course, I said yes. And they, for once, I had like a year and a half of work time that I can do to do the research and work. And so this built on the research that I had been doing, and it sort of extends it. And this is the second iteration. So, a lot of the core works are the same, but we've changed few as came to Abu Dhabi, and it's going to open as a continuation in Mathaf in October, inshallah, under a different title, but a continuation of the same research. It's an excuse to not only delve deep in these periods and these works, but specifically the Baghdad Modern Art Group, which is an important group that everyone knows by name, but very few knew exactly what the group is, because I even get messages from Iraqi artists saying, why do you have this artist in the show? He wasn't in the group, but he was, because I have the archival records for it. This exhibition is half the works and half archives. But the point is that, even for ones who lived through this period, they can't remember everything. And you don't know everything if you do not contextualize it and research it. So this is that opportunity to focus all that research into more specific, more kind of rich context, as well as an opportunity to bring all these works of art together. This is the work that is on loan from 5 different collectors, as well as individuals and artists and so on, and as well as archival material from these different places. And so it is probably the one time that all the members of the group come together in one room since the time that they exhibited together. But it is also, an extremely important moment for teaching in the region, with all the possibilities that are taking place. And so this exhibition is closed at the moment, but we're deciding to extend it to the end of the year when we reopen, inshallah, and so that to allow for all the programs that we also wanted with it. And it's a big exhibition with different sort of clusters that are very thematic, but they are, and it's very much supported by a lot of notes, curatorial notes, a lot of writing. So because it is, I really want, it's almost like a book on the wall, but I'm told not boring books. So, I really want everyone to delve into these relationships and knowledge. And All Manner of Experiments is, the title comes from the manifesto of the Baghdad Modern Art Group, which a moment where Jawad Salim says, what would linger in the artist's mind is how to develop, how to deliver the call for Istilham al-Turath, or the call for the connection, and All Manner of Experiments is the answer to it, and which speaks of the freedom of art that he was also advocating, speaks of the variety, because there was no style, but it was a philosophy and aesthetic. Yeah, very rich exhibition.
So before I wrap up, I just want to open up for a couple of questions, but I want to pick my first. I want to volunteer a question or volunteer a comment from Ustad Ziya Azzawi, if possible. Ustad Ziya, your name came up more than anyone else. If you want to say something, please unmute yourself. بس لا شيل الميوت الله يخليك أستاذ ضياء لو تسمح.
No, you have to allow him. You have to allow him to.
You have to unmute him.
So it okay. Yeah.
Is it okay now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. This is something which is really very enjoyable moment. I didn't, especially about the first years of Nada. But anyhow, I don't want to have any comment about this because I'm part of it. But what I really appreciate to have such a fantastic landscape of her activities. And thank God for her knowing Nada. Once when I was planning to publish the book of Maqamat al-Hariri, I contact Olga Grabar, who is one of the most important historian in Islamic art. The first email I sent to him, he said, sorry, I'm too busy with my work. And after 5 days, I received another email from him saying that, are you the artist? The Azawi? I said, yes. He said, okay, I will do it. And I'm coming to London to meet you. And we have such a discussion. Fantastic. It was Nada a part of it because of her book. So I'm really grateful for knowing you and with all the activity you did and the research, despite the fact that, you know, it's a lot of people which they don't like what you are doing. But anyhow, be strong and do more of such a fantastic activity.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dia. I would have not been able to do half of the work I do without Dia's support. And I also want to say Oleg Grabar, who was an Islamic art historian, was one of my main supporters. And my methodology in the book, Modern Arab Art, is based on his methodology of formation of Islamic art. And he, in fact, I saw him just sort of shortly before he died, and he said to me, oh, Nada, look, you know, when you were saying modern Arab art, no one knew what you were talking about. Now everyone is talking about it. So Allah yarhamah. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Many thanks.
Thank you, Stalvia. So, for the sake of timekeeping, we've taken so much of your time. I think I'll call this Majlis reboot to end. I want to say thank you to Dr. Nada for giving us time from her Eid break. Thank you all for joining us. We have some really super, important people in the arts field here today. We've got, in addition to Dia Azawi, we've got Antonia Carver, Mirna Ayyad, George Al-A'ma, Suhaila Takesh. We've got Afif Al-Aibi. We have so many people. I'm sure I forgot a bunch of other people. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Nada, for everything you're doing. I hope you can reopen the exhibition again so we can visit. I never visited. I'd love to visit. And I hope to see you in upcoming iterations of this Majlis. We hope to have it every other week. So look out for the next announcement very soon. Thank you all. Thank you. And enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you, Sultan, and thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Ma salama.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.